none of these things are actually realistic. They're all different constructions, and it's the sound that sells the impact, because our conception of a slap is like, but actually on nobody's face would ever make that sound.
Hi, Natalie and Alexandre. Welcome to Director's Notes.
Thank you. We're so
Thank you.
happy to be here.
Yeah, I was so thrilled.
I'm just going to open up and give you a minute to introduce yourselves in a bit more detail and tell us about the film we're going to be talking about today.
Sure. So I'm Natalie Musteata.
And I'm Alexandre Singh. We're the co-writers and co-directors of the short film Two People Exchanging Saliva.
And our film is set in a world where people pay for things by being slapped in the face, and kissing is illegal and punishable by death.
Our backgrounds are that I'm a visual artist, Natalie is an art historian and a curator, and we had wanted to make films for a long time. This is only the second film that we've ever worked on, and we kind of brought a lot of our sort of visual art perspectives on things. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're on this incredible roller coaster. You've only just got into filmmaking, really, and now huge congratulations on your Oscar nomination.
Oh, thank you
Thank
so
you so
much. Yeah, no, I mean, when we started making this a few years ago, we certainly never imagined being here today. So
Yeah.
it's surreal, it's wonderful, it's frightening, but it's amazing. So
It's also, but for us personally, it's a really wonderful moment where a lot of the things that the film touched upon and kind of alludes to in terms of the rise of authoritarianism and obviously the situation in Iran, that like we could have imagined, but we hope that it wouldn't take such a dark turn. So this is kind of like,
well, I wouldn't describe it as wonderful.
no, what do you mean?
Well, you said it was really wonderful, but
No, I'm saying like the experience of the film doing so well is kind of tempered by the unfortunate saliency
oh, I see.
of the film. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's one of those scary realities that now we're watching a lot of those dark dystopian films and TV series, and we can clearly see how that reality is possible. I mean, it's not
Mhm.
right, but it's a
Yeah.
reflection of where we are.
Yeah,
It's
I
one
mean,
of the sad things about these kind of political situations is that they're so easy to satirize, and eventually the satire becomes reality. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, when we were writing this story, which, on the surface sounds really ridiculous and silly,
Mm.
we were inspired by things that were already, sort of like the inception of a lot of things that are happening right now in this moment. I mean, it was before Trump's second presidency, but he was campaigning. There was Ron DeSantis in Florida that was reintroducing the Don't Say Gay law. There was the women's movement in Iran, which obviously has huge parallels with what's happening right now in Iran. And so everything that, is happening today is, a sort of continuation of the things that were inspiring us at the time. And, there's so many, sort of like more documentarian or realist approaches to contemporary society that we really love. Like our friends are nominated with their documentary
Cutting Through Rock.
Cutting Through Rocks, and then there's The Voice of Hin Rajab. Our strength is to subvert the reality and to make it weird, and so, but in essence, like we were sort of like being fed and but by the same horrific things that are happening in the world right now.
Yeah. It's all the different ways you can look at it. Watching your shorts, and I was discussing it with my partner, there's so many different takes that you can have. There's so many different ways you can look back at it all. It's one of those beautiful films that one person might draw something out of it, and someone else could draw an entirely different, reality, which I think is part of that beautiful puzzle you've created.
Yeah, we actually really love reading the letterbox reviews because sometimes people say things that we never thought of. And we're like, yeah, I mean, obviously, like once you make an artwork and it's out in the world, people can interpret it however they want. And like this sort of like, yeah, the authorship is handed over to the audience, in a sense. But So we really always love hearing how people respond to it.
Especially since there's this old adage in writing, which is write what you know.
Yeah.
I think a more interesting way of thinking about that, and I'm not the first person to say this, is write what you feel. And when we were writing this, we were writing what we felt, which was kind of bewilderment, shock, horror, but also a kind of like tender optimism, that kind of that shoot of green plant life in a stark wilderness, which is what we've wanted to imbue in our characters, especially in the character of Malaise, this young woman who, in this world where everything is so dour and color has literally been sucked out of the world, everyone has an awful name, everyone's breath smells bad, everyone has a terrible job, everyone is she still has this kind of hope and optimism in the face of what seems an insurmountable society, and that kind of hope is something, and I think that's kind of what like art is. Art is that maybe it's like maybe doomed to fail, but that attempt to be Malaise, to be optimistic, to be empathetic.
Well, I think that if you have no optimism, then
No,
like, it's the end. So,
Yes.
yeah,
I think it's also one of the beautiful qualities of humanity is our
yeah.
ability to find hope even in the
Mm.
darkest of moments.
And I guess in to circle back, that is something that some of the feedback from the film, that's what people have been connecting to, that aspect of it, which is um yeah, it's very touching. Right.
Yeah. But in terms of the tonality, I mean, like when I think of absurdism, it's often tied to autocratic regimes.
Very much
Like,
so.
if you think of Bulgakov,
Yeah.
The Master and the Margarita,
Yes.
like is, a response to,
Mm.
yeah, the early 20th century and in Russia,
Mm.
or, in Romania, like the absurdist theater movement came
Mm.
out of like communism,
Mm.
and the absurdity of life under Ceausescu.
Mhm.
So there's always been this relationship.
And
Yeah.
we talk about often our film is sometimes touched upon it in terms of dystopia.
Mhm.
And actually, if you think about dystopia, Orwell's 1984, I mean, obviously there's the wonderful Animal Farm, but 1984 is about absurdism. When a government tells you 2 + 2 = 5, that is a surrealist gesture. That is when it tells you that we have always been at peace with Oceania, or we've always been at war with, this. That is absurdism. We've talked sometimes when discussing the film that we don't think of the film as science fiction,
Mhm.
because we often think of science fiction as being um, a film or a book that suggests how the world could come to be if we keep following this direction. Whereas absurdism suggests that the world is already like this,
Yeah.
but you're so inured to it. And one of the nice things about uh, our work is that we kind of think of what it would be like for an alien to look at our society, someone who doesn't understand the social niceties, the way society is structured. And in some ways, we have an alien of our own, because we have a 4-year-old daughter, and so she doesn't understand how money works, what you should and shouldn't say, that you shouldn't put your feet on the table, and I think that's true for all young people in societies. They don't accept the things that we just have been beaten into us in
Yeah.
terms of how society functions.
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. And talking about dystopian or sci-fi, I wanted to ask about the chapters. Why is it divided? We start with le jeu, and then we have l'incident, and it gives it a very parable-like feel.
Hmm.
Yeah, the parable was very important to us. And I think because we don't come from film, but we've always wanted to work in film,
Mm.
when we were given an opportunity to shoot something, we pushed it to its utmost limits. The invitation to us was to make a 3 to 4 minute film. And we were like, how about a 30 something film? How about we just tack on an extra half an hour to that? But we really wanted to tell, our sort of pitch was that we really wanted to tell a story that had a beginning, middle, and end. And that, for us, as absurd as this world is and as much fun we had with like the world building of it, for us it's a story about these three characters and their journey, and how their lives intersect, and most of all how they respond to this autocratic regime in very different ways, which is what ultimately leads to the film's finale.
But the
So
chapter markers are helpful, as Natalie says, in terms of setting a certain tone, as the voiceover does,
Yeah.
to kind of ground. The film is grounded, but we're kind of we're sitting over this world. It's not quite exactly our world. On a very practical level, in terms of pacing, it kind of
accelerates
it accelerates the storytelling. It kind of breaks up the story into little digestible chunks. And I think for us, it offered an opportunity to do a little sort of like what do they call it in screenwriting, setup and payoff, because the postcards that we see are of artworks from classical artworks from history of couples embracing. And these are little clues that kissing is a subject matter of the story. And then later we'll realize that
and
these,
also that obviously kissing was not always illegal, because there are these sort of like contraband, like
and that
images.
these postcards are the postcards that were in the Desperate Woman's handbag, or later in in Angine's possession, which is just, it's always nice to kind of connect the little threads of the story and to really activate the audience and let them figure things out for themselves in a way that's satisfying for them.
We it's funny because after we had made the film, we watched, we love the films of Buñuel, and you know, he's like an obvious influence for us, but a lot of his work we haven't seen in decades. Like, you know, there are things that we watched when we were
children.
early, like teenagers, and so we rewatched one of his films,
the Phantom of Liberty.
The Phantom of Liberty, and about 10 minutes in, there's a scene of these children in a playground in Paris, and an older man comes up to them and he gives them some postcards, and we don't see what's on them, and they take them home and they're looking at them.
It's a dirty old man looking at some children in a Parisian playground, and he has a long overcoat. It's very Python-esque.
And these two little girls are caught by their mother, who takes away these postcards, and she's like, where did you get these? And we still don't know what's on them. And then she goes over to her husband and they start looking at them, and now they're finally revealed as famous buildings in Paris, like the Arc de Triomphe and the Tour Eiffel, and you know, they're looking at them as if they're pornography. They're like, oh my God, do you remember when we used to look at things like this? And so there's this, you know, we were like, oh my God, we plagiarized from Buñuel.
No, but there's a spirit in surrealism that goes back, I mean, hundreds of years, in terms of these kind of gestures where you turn the rules of society upside down.
As a way to reflect back on the absurdity of our own society.
I mean, there's these moments of throughout history, often in pagan societies, where the fool becomes the king for a day. This sort of like when top up becomes down, and it's a way of kind of almost like shaking the social fabric of society. And we kind of need that sometimes when we have this pyramid with Elon Musk at the very top and everyone else like crushed underneath. And we need in our society to be able to rattle all these little balls and rearrange things, at least if it's only in our own imagination.
And then I think it's always scary how easily things fall into place. Watching everything in the film, you immediately accept it all. You know, I was wondering, why wouldn't you have the worst breath ever? In our minds, we can so easily fall into those roles, which I think is the scariest part of it all.
Well, I think in terms of like, you know, in a film, it's always like, do the characters follow the logic of their own society? So
they behave as human beings would behave.
Exactly.
We've grown up understanding from a young age what motivates people and how they will behave. And you change the rules of society, the same kind of behaviors will still manifest themselves. So a small example for those who are paying attention when they watch our film: in this society, people pay for things by being slapped in the face. The more expensive the purchase, the more slaps. Only the wealthy can really get slapped around a lot, and as a result, end up with bruised faces. Is this a sign of something to hide. No, quite the opposite. You kind of want to show off how bruised your cheeks are. And then when the staff of the store who don't have bruised cheeks finish work, we see them painting bruises onto their cheeks
Yeah.
because they aspire to the social classes that they serve.
Yeah,
Yes.
the signifiers of wealth will always be mimicked, no matter
No
no
matter what.
matter what they are.
Yeah,
I mean,
even if
you
they,
know,
for thousands of years it was to have pale skin because you
Yeah.
didn't go outside, you needed work. And then for a brief moment in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was to look brown and orange.
well,
Yeah, it was
because
more
some
the
people
orange.
still aspire to that.
Someone still aspires to that aesthetic.
He's still got it.
Yes.
Okay, I want to dig into the slaps. I think they're brilliant. And there's a hierarchy to them. How loud they are, how shocking they are, how strong they are. And also, which I want to get into later, there's an eroticism to them. But I'd love to know more about the detail of planning and capturing and recording those slaps, exactly how they sound.
Yeah, I mean, we shot them all at once.
Okay.
We had a stunt coordinator on set who actually also plays the character is called the Desperate Woman, she's the one that's carried down the stairs and put into the box.
Okay, the
So
blonde,
that's
is she
our
blonde?
stunt
Yeah.
coordinator. Yeah. So that's our stunt coordinator who was on set basically to make sure that the slaps looked real.
She was the slap specialist.
Okay.
They're not real.
Sometimes, very rarely, because
there are certain angles.
flaps are basically combat. So if
Yeah.
you've ever worked with combat in the theatre or in film, it's about selling the impact. There are certain angles that will work, others that won't, unless you just do it for real. Sometimes you have to do it for real because
But honestly, like as our stunt coordinator told us, like the real ones don't look good, and they don't look real because people anticipate it.
Yes.
And so they actually end up flinching, and so in order to sell it, it's all through the sound actually, and just making sure that the hand and the face are moving at the right speed.
And very much like the sound of there's a vocabulary of punching and kicking, all the way from the very artificial in Hong Kong cinema to what we think of as more realistic, something like Fight Club. None of these things were actually realistic. They're all different constructions, and it's the sound that sells the impact, because our conception of a slap is like, but actually on nobody's face would ever make that sound. So there is if you want to get very technical, there's in our film we layered different slaps with different timbres, a different sort of, like a very bassy slap, a very medium range slap. Our sound designer Damien Volpe, who's incredibly talented, actually moved the slaps very slightly off from one another, and then really EQ'd them. And then this is one of those things that works much better in the cinema than at home, because a slap is like a gunshot. For it to really have impact, it needs an enormous amount of dynamic range. So to sell it, you need to have your score and your music and the film sitting here, and then there's just a huge spike for the slap. So technically speaking, it's a fun challenge.
Yeah. But I mean, we shot them all in one night. It was a very long night because the whole film is shot in between midnight and 6 a.m. And we had a lot of time pressure to get all of these, slaps done one after another. And it happened to be the moment that the representatives of the store that we were shooting in decided to come check out the shoot at 3 o'clock in the morning when we're shooting all these slaps. And I was sure that they were going to be like, this is a terrible idea. This is we got to shut this down. But, to their credit, they were like, oh, interesting. Okay, great. Carry on. And so, but it was, it was a fun night.
I think the slap, the eroticism, the sensuality of the slapping is really thanks to the incredible performances of our two leads, Sarah Mir and Luana Bajrami. It's in their lingering looks, and the way they kind of relish it. And it's the society where they have almost very little physical contact, no intimacy, and they take this supposedly banal act and they make it beautiful and sexy for them. And it's all in their eyes. It's that sell it.
Yeah, you've got so much. There's desire, there's fear, there's excitement. So knowing you recorded them all differently, how did you then choreograph those actual passionate moments?
I mean, well, we storyboarded the whole film,
Mm.
so everything, because we knew we were going to be so um so you know
Mm.
like that the shoot was going to be so tight, and that we really didn't have a minute to lose. And the story is kind of constructed like a Swiss watch. Like you can't really lose something without breaking another part of it. And so we yeah did a 3D rendering of the entire film.
Like a previs
Oh, wow.
animation of the whole film, which you can see on our Instagram and on our YouTube
Well, you can
channels.
see little clips of
clips of
it.
it.
Okay.
But yeah, we scanned every single location that we were going to shoot in,
Mm.
a couple of months or a few weeks, or sometimes the day before we were shooting. And then we created a 3D model, and we put the characters inside the model.
And then we
And so-
animated the characters so that they would move around the space, and then the
Yeah.
camera would move around. So we had a good sense of what we would be looking at, because
Yeah.
there was a lot.
Yeah. And there were certain parts of the film that were so planned out that like we even knew what music that like we were hopefully going to be able to use in the film. And like, there's a Philip Glass piece in the middle of the film,
Mm.
which we fought for. We didn't have the budget for it, and we just used every angle possible to get to the foundation. And finally a friend of a friend knew someone there, and they acquiesced after many months, because we had planned the montage with the music, and had become quite attached to this sort of like central moment where they begin to fall in love.
That's amazing planning. And I guess that's what you need when you're shooting somewhere as iconic as Galeries Lafayette. I'd love to dig into specific equipment. There's one scene that I'm thinking of where we're down on the staircase and we're looking right up at Malaise, who's in this glass box, which I loved. And knowing sort of the layout of it and Galeries Lafayette a bit, I'd love to know, how that was captured.
Well,
that was quite easy, actually.
Yeah, actually, and the funny thing is, so our director of photography, Alexandre was the first project we worked on, and we came to her as visual artists with all of our mood boards and all of our pre-visualization, and she was a little trepidatious at first, what will I contribute here? And eventually we found a really wonderful back and forth where we would share visualizations, she would make suggestions, but she did say to me that was one of the shots that she thought we would have never found on location if we hadn't pre-visualized it.
Okay.
And it's a very, very simple shot, and it was pulled off using a tripod and just panning and tilting. But it's all about
There's no fancy camera work in the film. It's all a mixture of just like simple like pointing the camera in the right direction and then panning. Or it's
sometimes we tilt.
Sometimes we tilt. and then the rest of it, when we're outside, we're handheld.
In the entire film, so we created two different cinematic languages. Inside the store, the camera is very observational. It sometimes zooms very slowly. It pans very slowly. It tilts very slowly. We only used dolly track for I think 3 shots of the entire film, which was during that slapping montage, which was very romantic and musical, and we wanted to create a sense of like being transported. And then we're only using 6 foot, 8 foot of track. This is like the most simple, bare bones camera work you can imagine. And then when we're outside,
when we're outside, we really wanted to have that. A lot of the times when we're outside, we're in Melissa's perspective, and we kind of associated the handheld camera with her. And then even when we use it with Angine later on in the film, like the theory was sort of that she's been like infected by Melissa's spirit, and so like she takes on, because this sort of like still rigid camera, the observational camera, we really associated with the store, with the sort of like the sort of perfectionism and rigidity that environment dictates, and the world of Angine and Petulant, and so I don't know, there are a couple of filmmakers who have like noticed this sort of dichotomy of styles that we brought together, and but I think most people just don't see it, which you know, hopefully is for the best, because when you're in a film, you just want to get lost into it and not be thinking about how it's been constructed.
Yeah,
One
but
of the
that's
things we did quite deliberately was in every single scene, apart from in the ravine, which is the place where there's nowhere to hide,
yeah,
there is always a mirror or reflective surface. And the camera is either shooting into the mirror or the characters are looking at themselves in a mirror. We're really thinking about the mirror as voyeurism, the sense of you feel like you are being watched. And I do feel that maybe because, as Natalie explained, we pre-visualized the whole film, that allowed us to understand these spaces incredibly well. And for example, in the scene in the bathroom where the character of Petulant, the antagonist, overhears Malaise brushing her teeth, that, for example, that master shot is a static shot where a character appears in a mirror and then goes from a mirror into the real world. And there was these moments where we're trying to recreate create depth and create a very dynamic image, but it's all an illusion because actually the camera, for example, in that scene, doesn't move one iota.
right.
It's locked off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing what you can do with cameras.
Yes.
Yeah.
We spoke about this briefly earlier, but your initial brief was for 3 minutes. You extended it, and in my research, I learned that there was a 52-minute cut.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, our script was only 30 pages, but our script supervisor read the script and very quickly told us that this was like a 45 to 48-minute film. And we were like, that's crazy. We were like, we're European, but we're also American. And we will cut this thing up like Hollywood style. And then the first cut was 52 minutes, and we were like, oh, interesting. We were very wrong. But we did manage to cut it down quite a lot. It's still, yeah, longer. I think we had been aiming for a 30-minute film, because really once you get above 30 minutes, you start to limit your possibilities in the festival circuit.
Oh,
Like,
massively.
I mean, really above like 15 to 20
Yeah.
minutes,
But
you're
the
already
30 is the
30 is the
is
European standard for a short film.
Bec-
So
because of
anything,
the European Film Awards. So
yeah.
it's like that area above Mount Everest where there's not enough oxygen. It's the death zone.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
Yeah.
Even from us. But,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. And
29 minutes, 59
I know you
seconds
guys
isn't-
just, you're right
yeah,
there.
but we didn't make it.
Right.
Our film is at 36 minutes, and we tried to get it under 30, and we just, you know, like we got it down to 32 once, but the film started breaking apart. We were just like losing the emotional depth of it.
Yeah.
Losing contrast where there's a character that's not really so important, which is the husband of Angine, the box designer.
Chagrin.
Chagrin. Very, you know, people were like, do we need Chagrin? And we took him out of the film, but there wasn't that contrast as with Malaise as to what is the choice that Angine is making,
Yeah.
and why is she so drawn to
this,
Malaise.
yeah,
And so
to this free spirit.
and the film, as Natalie said, we wanted to tell, we love short films, but we have great ambitions for short films. We didn't want to just create a situation. We want to tell a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in this film, we change perspectives. We begin with Malaise's perspective. We move to Angine's perspective. We even switch to the antagonist's perspective for a few minutes. But even in a feature, that would be quite a lift.
Yeah.
So we had this decision about, were we going to make a feature film by accident and have very long end credits, or were we going to just shape this into the very best short film that we could imagine?
Yeah.
And say 36 minutes is the sweet spot.
Well, it's just the tightest version that we could get without breaking the story.
Yeah.
Because for us, the catharsis at the end is the most important part of the film. I mean, like, we want people to feel emotionally connected to these characters, and to really, yeah, to you know, root for them. And we felt like once we started like cutting it further down, we were sort of like breaking apart that emotional ending.
I think you need it all. As you said, it's a Swiss clock. If we lose one thing, it all falls apart. And all of the absurdities, they do seem really logical, and the consequences, and I understood them all. So I think all of those stages are really necessary.
Yeah. And I mean, we've said before, we don't come from the film industry, so we were also coming from a very naive place, and we were just like, well, we're just gonna make the best thing that we can make with
We-
what we have, and
we love these characters and we want
and
the audience
hopefully,
to connect with them.
yeah, and hopefully the film will find its place. And you know, luckily it did. You know, like it could have gone a different way, but I think that, you know, when you pour your heart into something, and also like I think it's important to make bold choices and to
Yeah.
not shy away. You know, like Alex and I was talking about, like how sometimes, you know, like the edges of something are sharpened away and you end up getting with something that's very blunt, and we shied away from doing that.
And to make work, we didn't decide to do this, but there's something to be said for the value in just doing something for very, very genuine reasons, and not because it will lead to something else.
Yeah.
So that's what we did with this film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a question I'm asking all of the filmmakers we're interviewing.
Yeah.
I'm putting you on the spot, but I'd love to ask each of you what your favorite or perhaps most memorable short film is at the moment that maybe you've seen on the festival circuit, and why.
Oh, very interesting. Okay. Well, on the spot. I mean, it depends. Like we've seen so many over the last year, but go ahead. So
Well,
you're
let's do
ready.
one each.
You're,
Let's do one each.
One
well,
each.
you-
It doesn't
yeah,
have to be your favorite in the world. Maybe
yeah,
just the one that
yeah,
you know
yeah. Go
pops
ahead.
to your
I know
mind.
what you're gonna say.
And I think I know what you should say.
Okay, you're
Oh,
gonna make my
okay.
decision for me. Go ahead.
I want to shout out some films that we discovered on the. Sorry, I'm getting emotional thinking about it. Some films that we discovered on the festival circuit that played alongside our films,
Yeah.
and that really touched us and moved us, and films that aren't even in the same, let's say, like tonal register as our film, because we love films of all different kinds. But a film that really moved me when I saw it is a film that called One Day This Kid by Alexandre who is a story of a Afghan Canadian young boy, and you see his life through different chapters, growing up, and we have a sense that he's gay, and his somewhat conservative father refuses to recognize that and then disowns him. And it's a story that's incredibly told very economically, very very evocative, just beautiful, beautiful directing, incredible performances. And if I would really, really recommend that your audience to check out that film.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard to choose one. I mean, there we made I can have my own answer. But I mean, I'm gonna throw out two. One is The Boy with White Skin by Simone Panet, who we met at Clermont-Ferrand, and we were on a panel talking about craft with him, and we just thought that that film was so beautifully made. And then another duo that we also met at Clermont-Ferrand called Zhang and Knight, who made a film called A Bear Remembers,
Yeah.
which we also
I
thought was
love
really
that
beautiful.
film.
Yeah. And so I mean, there's just there's so many talented people out there making amazing things. And, you know, we ended up becoming really good friends with that duo. We went to Telluride together because we
told them to apply.
Yeah, we told them to
Oh,
apply. They hadn't
amazing.
heard of it.
Yeah.
And we were like, well, we premiered at Telluride and we're going back just as fans, because we're groupies now of the festival. And so they applied and they got in, and, you know, Telluride only programs like 5 shorts.
Yeah, I know.
So it's a very select group, and somehow they made it in, and
Well,
so
it's a
I
great.
mean, yeah, no,
It's
but like, you know, of all, like, you know,
Yeah.
like we meet these filmmakers and then like we tell them to apply, they get in.
It
It's a
becomes a
very-
very small world once you
Yeah.
get to know it, the
Yeah.
short film world.
Yeah. And then we all ended up sharing a house together, and so we had this really nice bonding moment.
It's a very original film that
Yeah.
I think people on Letterboxd have described as a Studio Ghibli live action film, in the sense that it's imbued with great melancholy. It's a world where spirits and imaginative creatures coexist with a very contemporary, some like downtrodden Britain.
Yeah.
And it's very unique in terms of there are very few short films that are kind of treading in this territory, and it's beautifully executed. And yeah, and also they're really lovely people too.
Yeah.
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 No, that's a fabulous film. I think I saw it last year at
Mm.
Clermont-Ferrand, the same kind of time. And
Yeah.
yeah, it really surprised me, sort of in all the best ways.
Mm.
Mm.
So, I mean, as alongside doing the press and talking to people like me, what's next? What world building are you guys doing? What's going to be following?
Well, we're writing 3 scripts at the same time. They're kind of in different stages of development.
Mm.
They're all absurdist. They're all inspired by
Mm.
very absurd things that are happening in our world right now. And one of them is the feature-length version of Two People Exchanging Saliva,
Mm.
which was not planned,
Mm.
because obviously we wouldn't have made the film 36 minutes if
Yes.
we were like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, let's now make this into a feature. But the interest, right around the time of Clermont-Ferrand, it became really obvious that there was a lot of interest in a feature-length version, and
Mm.
we sort of, took a couple of months after Clermont to, like, sort of imagine what the feature-length version would look like and whether we had an inkling of, yeah,
Mm.
whether we felt inspired to do a longer version.
Mm.
And the inspiration came, and we know what's going to happen to our characters. It's the same 3 characters. It's a similar story, but the world is
Mm.
more developed, and their love story is yet more impactful.
And then the other 2 projects are kind of responding to what's happening in the political moment, what we're seeing, but equally very absurd, or I would say more than absurd, ridiculous, very ridiculous premises, but then treated very seriously, because for the characters living in these worlds, this is their reality,
Yeah.
and that's the perspective we have on the way that we tell stories, and always with looking for that emotional arc, that
Yeah.
catharsis at the end. That's the film. That's what really excites us about cinema. Are those films that are bold, that make strong choices. Sometimes very imaginative films, but always where the end just really gets to you emotionally, and you really really feel for the characters. That's
Yeah.
what motivates us.
Yeah.
Those are the films that live in your sort of memory long after,
Yeah.
and those are the
Mm.
kind of films as well that I'll find myself. You'll be doing something completely random, and just
Mm.
it'll pop into your head,
Yes.
for some reason, and those are the ones that you've got to go back to.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to hear that you're both sticking with filmmaking.
Oh,
Yeah, no, we're so excited to
Yeah.
be, we started talking about this a decade ago, so it's been
Mm.
a long transition
Yeah.
for us,
Yeah.
but we're happy to have the opportunity to make more.